we are going to be shifting gears tonight a little bit. I was talking to some people in our Finding Your Place thing Saturday, and other times they recommended that we just start going into evangelism. So I realize the irony is that Acts is all about evangelism, but it's not really like a good course of study if you want to learn how to evangelize. It gives us some pointers and some general overviews, general principles that we can use, but we want to get a little bit more specific. So we're going to shift gears, and for the next, I don't know, several weeks, get into some teaching on evangelism. Some of it's going to come from stuff that I presented 2 years ago. It may have even been a Wednesday night. I don't remember. Maybe a Sunday morning, but that's what this is from, and it's actually from the course that I teach at Brown Trail, and at least part of it. It's kind of modified, but that's what we're going through, and we'll talk about also the characteristics of what we're trying to do here, and hopefully everyone can be on the same page that way, or at least all of us in this room can be on the same page, and we're slowly but surely trying to let everyone know what's going on, because there's still quite a bit of confusion, or quite a bit of people thinking they don't really know what's happening. So we want to try to communicate as much as we can, and Wednesday night seems to be a good place to start. So let's go ahead and have a prayer, and then we can get going. Father in heaven, thank you for the opportunity that we have to get together to discuss your word, to discuss how we can bring it to the people around us and the communities. Help us, Lord, as we do this, that we'll bring glory to you, that we'll find needs and fill them, that we'll show love. And Lord, let that be genuine. Help us, Lord, to truly love others, and not simply look for gain, but look for their gain, their benefit. We thank you, Father, that there have been so many people who have done the same with us, that treated us well and loved us and taught us your word. We thank you, Lord, that you've been with us so patiently over the years and helped us. And in the growth that we've gone through, we know, Father, that you're the one who is the originator, and you're the one who is the motivator. And you've given us everything that we need in order to be pleasing to you. We thank you, Father, for that word that you've given us. We pray, Lord, that as we face temptations and trials, that we will overcome, that we will use the wisdom that you can provide to us, that we can understand what we're facing and understand how to pull through it in the best way so that you receive as much glory as possible. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Okay, so if you look at it, just ignore where it says read through syllabus and stuff. Like I said, I just printed my notes, and we'll go through this. And there's not a lot of discussion in here about scriptures right now that will be coming. It's just more of an overview, and it's going to kind of dig into why we do evangelism, what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And this is something that should be near and dear to all of us to some degree. Not all of us are going to be out necessarily sitting down with someone at their kitchen table having Bible studies, or at your kitchen table, wherever, having Bible studies, although there's no reason that we can't. It's simply the fact that some of us have opportunities, and some of us have abilities and skills, and others of us may not have those. That doesn't mean that they can't be developed. It just depends on whether or not we're going to put the time in. And so what we have to do is look at each other and realize that we all are different, and we all are going to approach this from a different perspective. And there's nothing wrong with any of the perspectives when we talk about these things. But it is something that all of us should be interested in for numerous reasons. Not the least of which is, of course, the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, 18 through 20. That was directed to the apostles, but those 12 men they took the gospel to the entire world, but the entire world, all the people in the world that heard the gospel didn't hear it just from them. They taught other people how to do it too. And so by implication, we have been taught through scriptures and through their example to do the same thing. So we're just going out into the places where we can and doing what we should, and that is reaching people with the gospel. And so some of us are a little more aggressive than others at it, but all of us should be at least thinking about how we could introduce somebody, or at the very least, bring them so that they can be introduced to the gospel, because there's so many reasons for that. And uh, for me, the greatest reason is because we want to touch souls. We want to help souls go to heaven. And the alternative is not something I like to consider. And so that's motivation enough. But there are a lot of other reasons as well, showing love, that kind of thing. But I wanted to discuss this and think about this is where we want to speak up. It may be a little personal, but I want to ask why it is that we should evangelize. I already gave you one reason, so I took that out of your arsenal. I want to hear why it is. There's motivations. There's two different kinds of motivation. There's intrinsic and extrinsic. Extrinsic means that it's a motivation from the outside. Intrinsic means that it's motivation from the inside. Ideally, we want to be motivated from the inside out, but that doesn't mean that there's not extrinsic motivations. Have you ever had a job where the only motivation you had to do it was extrinsic? I have. And I was glad that it was there because it pushed me through to do things that I didn't really want to do. And I was able to provide for my family. Even though I didn't necessarily enjoy it, there was not much of an intrinsic value with it. There was, however, extrinsic. So it's not wrong to be extrinsically motivated. Is that the right word? Outsidely motivated. So why is it that we should evangelize? What are some of the reasons that we have that we can come up with for motivating ourselves? Save souls. Yeah, but I already said that one. So you can't say that one again. You was in the back. We already said that one. Sorry. Improve their lives. Okay, that's definitely true. Any other ones? Oh, well, let's talk about that one for a second. How does the gospel improve their lives? I mean, I know that's one of those no duh questions, but it's good for us to think about it, because does it necessarily improve their lives from a physical standpoint? It can, yeah. So how could it? Okay, yeah, good habits. The book of Proverbs comes to mind. There's no guarantee that if you obey the book of Proverbs, you will have great things happen to you. But I guarantee you, if you do the opposite of what Proverbs says, you're going to have a terrible life. So it is good for us to look at that. It can help us. Robert, you have your hand up? Yeah, because we're told to do it. Yeah, and that ought to be enough, right? If it were enough, we would all be doing it all the time. But okay, so it's an expression of love, and if we claim to love other people, but we never tell them how we're going to be saved, and they're not, yeah, that's really not love. That's something that, for example, this is something for us to consider as we're writing all the cards and praying for the people. We need to be very careful what we're doing. It can very easily, and you probably see this, it can very easily become one of these things. We just write some cards. We don't really care about them. We just write them some cards so that they'll come to church. Beyond that, how would we show that we cared? By our interactions, by what we do, right? So, for example, when we had Amanda, we sent her all these cards. I mean, we sent lots and lots and lots of cards, condolences, and we're still sending them. And she had her funeral. Wouldn't it be good for Christians to come and show support? Of course. Why? Because we've told her for weeks that we love her. We want to take care of her. We want to help her. So that's a good time. That's a good thing to do. And so we had people coming in and showing support and love, and that's what you would expect to see. What you wouldn't want to see is we send all these cards to someone, and then they're in dire need, and I sent you some cards. I don't know what more you expect, right? That's kind of that's the starting point, right? That's just kind of introducing ourselves to the people, and so it's not done. We want to make sure we're not doing it as a form of manipulation, right? I send you stuff, so you have to come to church with us. That's how it works. Now that is a way to do it. You can do some things enough for other people that they start feeling guilty for not reciprocating, and that is a tactic that people use even in sales. But that's not Christ-like, is it? What Christ-like would be if you tell someone you're interested in them, then show interest, right? So that's a good thing to do, and that's a challenge for us because all of us love. We all love other people, but we're also limited in how much we love and the circle of people that we love, aren't we? There's we love to say I love everybody, but practically speaking, we don't because for one, there's a limit to how much love we can show at a given moment and to whom we can show it to, right? It's great for me to say I love everyone in Caddo Mills, but I can't go and show love to 3,000 people in the next week or two. There's no possible way I could do that. So I may have the intention or the motivation, the feeling of love toward humanity, but in practicality, the practice of it is where we have to put. That's where the rubber meets the road, right? As you might say, in interpretation of First John is put your money where your mouth is. Instead of talking about it, let's show it. Let's do it. And that's a challenge. That is very difficult. And every single person alive has those limits that we put. Sometimes those limits are just physical limits that we're just humans. Other times those limits are limits that we've actually imposed on ourselves of who we will and will not interact with, for example, or all kinds of reasons that we come up with about whether they're valid or invalid. We do come up with reasons about why we may or may not interact with certain people. Like I said, they may be valid, but we have to recognize that they're there. Okay, so that's one part of the motivation. Why else would we evangelize? Yes. It helps our spiritual growth. All right. Can you explain how? That's true. It's very motivating. So when you come off of a success of you're teaching someone the gospel, sometimes even if they don't accept it, you still have that kind of motivates you to do it again, right? It's kind of addictive, honestly. Start helping people, and you start seeing people respond. It's kind of like you're a junkie looking for that next fix after a while. But I mean, I don't want to be crude about it, but it really gets under your skin, and you really want to continue doing it, right? Very good. Anything else? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So we get to practice those characteristics. Uh-huh. Sure. Here, and that's certainly true. So when we're working with people, we're gonna have to use a lot of attributes that we may not normally use or practice that much, and now we get the opportunity to practice them. I say we don't use them because we all have the potential to be patient with people, but what do we tend to do with those people that we have to be the most patient with? We tend to we distance them. And I'm not saying that's wrong because we can only take so much, right? But we don't have the opportunity. But now we're actually putting ourselves in a position where we can actually practice the fruit of the Spirit, and that there's improvement right there. So we get a lot out of it. There's a saying, and everyone who's taught anything knows this: the teacher learns more than the students. Uh, Absolutely, this is the truth, and um, that's the reason why newer preachers or less experienced preachers tend to make to go on and on and on because you don't want to leave anything out. You got so much there, God, but as with every sermon, every lesson, every Bible class, there is so much more that could be said than was actually being said. And so, as a teacher or a preacher or whatever, our job, or even sitting down with studying with someone, our job is to figure out, okay, what is it that they actually need? Not what do I want to say, and providing them with their needs is a very important part of this. All right, so we learn and grow. Any other motivations? These are all intrinsic. Can you think of any extrinsic motivations? You're looking for a spouse? Well, I guess that will be that's kind of intrinsic, but it's a different way of looking at it for sure. So, yeah, you can evangelize, and that's not a bad way to find a spouse, though, I guess. Any extrinsic motivations? Come on, you're not, you got some. So, okay, some other people will encourage you. What you were saying, Jenna, was more intrinsic because you're trying to avoid pain, I guess. But extrinsic would be if someone pats you on the back. Is it wrong to do something because with the hope that you would be encouraged when you did it? That's true. It's not something that, if that's your primary motive, there's a problem, right? But is it wrong to expect at least someone sometime to pat you on the back and say good job? No, it's not wrong at all. So wives sometimes, especially if they're housewives, will face this challenge where their husband doesn't ever say anything to them because they said it when they got married and they have to worry about it anymore, right? So is it wrong for them to speak up and say, I need some encouragement now and then? No, it's not wrong at all. We are human beings and we need that kind of stuff. So that is part of our extrinsic motivation. God made us to be social beings. There's nothing wrong with that. Are there other things that you consider that would be external? How about helping the church have a good reputation? Is that wrong? Why is it so uncomfortable? There's nothing wrong with us trying to be an example to other people. Now, I do realize we have to balance that. That can't be our primary motivation. Our motivation is not, hey, look at me. That's not what I'm saying at all. But didn't Jesus say, let your light so shine among men that they may see your good works? He didn't say, let everybody hear how much you talk about doing them. He said, let them see your good works. Now, if no one ever sees that we're actually doing anything, do we have any good works to show? No. Why did Jesus say, let your light shine before men so they may see your good works? So that they will glorify your Father in heaven. Right. Right. That's true. But at the same time, we also recognize that a lot of times we're motivated by the way other people see what we're doing. Yeah. Okay. Jenna, is that what you were saying before? Okay. All right. I misunderstood. So when we help other people, we actually help the community around us. Things might improve in the country. Is that a bad thing to do? That's a pretty good thing, actually. No. Yeah. And everywhere that Christianity has gone, for the most part, the humanity has been elevated. Um, and yet now it doesn't seem like it's happening. So it's kind of going the reverse direction in some ways. All right, so I just wanted to bring that out because there's a lot of reasons that we might do something, and I want us to just think about them. What is it that we can do? Why would we do it? And if you're like me, um, you've probably analyzed your motives a lot, and you've probably realized that one, you never know what they are when you're walking into a situation. It's very difficult to know what your motives are. Looking back on them, it's a lot easier to figure them out. And two, it's rare that there's only one motivation. There are usually a lot of reasons that we do things. And so the more of those things that we can connect with and put in our repertoire, right, put on our belt, then when we face challenges and times we don't really want to do things, we can have different things that we can pull from as motivators. Say, okay, I can do this. I can do one thing. I can invite one person, or I can write one card, or whatever it is that we're going to do. So I think it's very important. Another thing about this, and this is going to come from, well, a lot of passages. Look at Galatians chapter 6 and verse 10, for example, and you may can come up with a lot of other passages here. He says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are the household of faith. Okay? And we've talked about doing good quite a bit last year. What is the idea of goodness related to? There's actually two things it relates to. Do y'all remember in this discussion that we've had? One is usefulness. The other one is what? What we normally think of as good is morality, right? So it has to be moral and it has to be useful, or it's not technically a good thing. And it's either useful to other people or it's useful to God in a sense, because we worship God. That's a good thing. We're doing it in accordance with the way He determined that we do that. So in that sense, it's usefulness. And if we're looking at then in Galatians 6:10, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all. The word opportunity there implies that it's not always available to us, but there's something that opens up. There's an opportunity for us to do something. And usually that means that there's a decision to be made, right? The decision is usually going to be whether I do it or not do it. So let's just be straight up with this. Is it possible for us to engage with every opportunity that comes along? No, it's not possible at all. And if you want to ruin yourself, you can. You could do everything. You could try. You can't really possibly do everything that's you have an opportunity to do. And so there's a sense in which even an opportunity is not really an opportunity anymore because I can't do it. So if I can't do it, it's not really an opportunity. But as you have opportunity, let us do good to all. And how are you going to do good to other people if usefulness is involved? What does that mean? I mean, how would you get to the point where you're actually useful to someone else? Sorry? Meeting their needs, yeah. So we're going to meet their needs. And how is it that we could possibly meet their needs? Where do we start? Yeah, we got to know what they need, right? We got to know what it is they actually need. And so if someone comes up, there was a man that came up to me at a gas station. I was in a hurry, and I was out of town, and I was just trying to get home because I'd spent the day trying to help my mother fix her roof. And he pulled up, and he rolled down his window, and he said, "Hey," like that. And I said, "Hello," and I just ignored him and kept pumping my gas. And he kept talking, but he was talking very softly. I knew he was doing it. He's just trying to get me to go over there, right? And I went over there, and I finally said, "What can I do for you?" And I didn't have a great attitude. And he started giving me the sob story. And he was talking so lowly, so low, I couldn't hear him. I couldn't understand what he was saying. And I knew what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to step like face to face with him, and I was not going to do that because I didn't know what was going to happen when he did. But that's a tactic. So, by the way, if anybody is talking very softly around you, either walk away or just assume what they want and give it to them. And just don't ever just walk up to someone like that, even if they're in a car. So I stayed about 3 feet from him, and I was straining to hear him, and finally I just I just took money out of my pocket and gave it to him and said, "Here, I don't know what you're saying, but just take this." And I left. I didn't have time to mess with it. Now, I don't know if that was right or wrong. I don't think my attitude was that great. I was annoyed because I knew what he was trying to do, but at the same time, the man needed help, supposedly. Ideally, what would you do if someone came up to you and said, "I need money"? Ideally, you're going to find out if they actually need it, right? How are you going to do that? Ask questions. It's not comfortable, but it's responsible. For all I know, that dude took that money and went and got drunk. I have no idea what he did with it. I'm not responsible for his decisions, but at the same time, I am responsible to the best of my ability to be responsible with what I have, right? So there's a balance. But why did I say that? Oh, because we've got to find out the needs that other people have, or we really can't help them, or you don't know if you're going to be able to help them. That's where relationships come in. So that means that as Christians and as evangelists, we are going to be problem solvers. Right? Now, the problems that we're going to be solving are going to be spiritual, but are there times we're going to solve physical problems too? Absolutely, because that's what love does. Could you imagine Jesus walking around having the ability to heal people, and he goes into a city and he teaches the gospel and he heals a person because then they could see his power. And then other people came to him. He says, "No, I've already healed somebody. I don't need to do it anymore. I've proven myself already." That's not the way he behaved. He in fact, it shows like in Mark in chapter 2, at the end of chapter 1 and beginning of chapter 2, it shows that he went to great lengths. He spent a lot of time. He wore himself out helping people. And it wasn't just preaching, it was helping, doing things for other people. That's a challenge for all of us because we have limited time and limited resources, and we've got to figure out priorities. And so then we have this pool of I got to do things to help other people, but then we have other things to do as well. So it's never an easy decision. But we have to recognize that if we're going to be good at evangelism, we're going to have to be problem solvers. Now, here's the thing, is we can't really solve people's problems. Who's responsible for solving their problems? They are. So how is it that we help them? We can listen. Yeah, that's true. What is it that we can do beyond listening? Give recommendations, right? So it's kind of like the phrase, we heard this before, you can take a horse to water, but what? You can't make him drink. So if someone has need and they come to you and they express a need and you say, okay, here are solutions, and they walk away and don't use them, did you do your job? Yeah. You helped them, but they didn't necessarily want it. So that's something to consider. We can't solve their problems, but we can guide them. We can support them in solving their own problems. And we also need to remember that their idea for a solution might be different than what God's solution is. And if that's the case, our job is to point it out and show, well, I know what you're trying to do, but God says this. Why don't we try this instead? And that will be good. And then two key words, I think there's probably more than this, but two key characteristics that go with that is patience and consistency. And both of those are really difficult, right? So I'm not going to pretend that evangelism and reaching the lost is going to be simple or easy. It's complicated. And what Rob presented to us and his stories and everything, those were all wonderful, and you do run into situations like that. I've actually run into people that were converted very easily, very quickly, and he was sharing some of those kind of instant success stories, but I promise you there are a whole lot more stories that he could tell that were not instant success, that were not as simple as he made out that they were. They were sometimes very complicated. And there have been times where I'd go home after dealing with people. I don't know how many times I've gone home almost in tears or pulling my hair out in frustration, talking to Carla. I said, I just don't know I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what they're going to need. I don't know what I can do. What more is possible? And that's part of it. So there's a lot of this. I'm going to be straight with you that is difficult, it's trying, and it's not fun, but it's worth it. And that's one of the reasons that we have, like the seminar that we had, that it takes a lot of motivational stories and things to get people involved and engaged, because we all know that it's difficult. Now, having said that, what happens typically, from what I've seen from people who haven't been involved, is they talk about, they think about those difficult times and they exaggerate them and blow them up. That's a possibility too, right? So I can convince myself that I just can't evangelize because I'm going to run into the first person I run into is going to have a whole list of problems I can't do anything with. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. You will run into that occasionally, but the good thing is that you're not doing it by yourself, theoretically, right? We're doing it as a team. Now, I've had times, and I've been in places where I was the only person doing Bible studies, and that was really tough because when I had problems, I had nobody to talk to. I didn't have anyone to bounce off things with. But we have a whole room of people that when we run into something we don't know how to deal with, we have other people we can talk to, and we can tag team that thing. And that's a blessing. Let me tell you, it's a blessing. So I just want to put that there. Sometimes we exaggerate in our minds what we're going to face. We all tend to do that. So if we went door knocking and I convinced you to go out with me door knocking tomorrow morning, and everyone took off work and we all met out there, and everyone's home because it's a holiday, which we can't do anyway because it's illegal. But anyway, we're going to go door knocking, and I say, okay, let's go. And everybody divides up into teams of two, and we go. And you're approaching that first door. Do you know what things are going to go through your mind? A lot of things. And there'll be irrational fears. And irrational is the word, because especially if you've never done it, you have no earthly idea what you're about to face. Nobody does. It's a door, right? It represents an opportunity. It's a door, and you don't know what's on the other side of it, but our brains will tell us we know exactly what's about to happen. There's going to be a big dog. There's going to be a gun pointed at my face when they open the door. There's going to be people in really, really risque-looking clothing trying to scare you off. There's going to be people who will pretend to be crazy. There are going to be people who will come up to the door and open it and say, freeze, walk away slowly. There are all kinds of things will go in your mind. All those things have happened to me, by the way. But I guarantee you there's thousands and thousands of houses that I've approached that I never had anything like that. Now, I'm not standing here saying that we're going to be door knocking. That's not the point. I'm talking about irrationality. Have you ever heard of the word? We've all heard the word rationalize. What does rationalize mean? A good excuse. What did you say? Yeah, we generally we're gonna rationalize. We're gonna rationalize not doing something by giving all the reasons why we can't, or we're gonna rationalize doing something by giving all the reasons that we have to, right? That we can't help it. Think of politicians. Do we do that though? All the time. We do it all the time. Now, I want you to think about this word, and you may have heard this before, but if you take the word and divide it up, it's all it is rational lies. That's all it is. And a lot of times they're irrational. We're just lying to ourselves, saying that we can't do something. If you run into the situation and you actually get into the situation, then you might say, I can't do it. But until you get into it, you don't know if you can or not. You don't know what the situation is. So anyway, you're going to be a problem solver. I'm trying to help you solve problems right now. Your problem is that you're going to try to trick yourself into not doing things because you're going to rationalize it. But can you think of any verses that would contradict or help with that situation of knowing that you can accomplish things? Bonnie's saying something. Are you going to say it out loud? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right? I have a mug that says I can do all things through a verse taken out of context. No, that's true though. In principle, we can do all things through Christ. Why? Because God help us to do things? Yes, absolutely He does. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. It's not. It doesn't mean that He's going to zap you, but He will help. And however way He helps, He's going to help. All right. Can you think of anything else? Any other verse? 1 Corinthians 15:58 is a really good one. He says, and I forgot it already. It's such a good verse that I haven't memorized it. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. So it doesn't matter what we endure. If we're doing it for the Lord, it's not in vain. It's going to be worthwhile, worth something. All right. So let's move on. The next part is about setting goals. I'm not going to get into that right now. There's really no reason to. But there is a section in here I want you to notice. How do you measure spiritual progress? That's a challenge, and we've discussed it before. But for example, patience. How much patience do you have? How do you rank that? I mean, you can't, right? So how do you know if you've actually improved from 3 years ago in your patience? How do you actually know if you've improved? The way you handle situations, yeah, that's true. So you have to look at your process, right? Having had more patience, so you actually multiplied your things, and you might look back and think, 3 years ago, I don't know if I could have handled this. Yeah, that's true. Any other ways? That's a really challenging one, isn't it? Does God expect us to grow in our patience? Yeah. Now, if you're like Carla, she will always say, never pray for patience. She said, honestly, it makes me angry every time she says it, but she still loves the joke. And she'll tell me every now and then, I know it's just a joke, but I think she's serious. And so I don't like it. She doesn't really say it around me that much, because in my mind, that's saying I don't want God to give me something that's a blessing. Now I understand the sentiment behind it, though. How do you get patience? You're gonna have to go through some stuff, right? You have to endure. So I get that. I don't really want to necessarily go through those things, but I want the patience. So if you're thinking about, let's think about another one. Let's think about joy. What is it? What's required for you to have joy in life? Okay, appreciation is one of them. Yeah. Can you think of anything else? What's required for appreciation? This is a really tough one, isn't it? Sometimes suffering, yeah. But what does suffering actually make us do? That pray, yeah, for sure. Grateful, yeah. Appreciation, gratefulness. What's required in order for us to be grateful or have appreciation? Acknowledgement, a realization, recognition, right? Our primary response should be in any situation. If James tells us, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, it's not recognizing necessarily the trial. I mean, you do recognize the trial, but you're also going to recognize some things inside the trial that may actually be beneficial. That's really hard to do sometimes, and we have to. There's a process, but recognition and appreciation of that, and then from there, it's actually an expression of it. It's we can appreciate something mentally, but when we express it, that's when the joy comes forth. So if we're going to have joy in our lives, our habits are going to have to. So what that means is we face challenges, or we just wake up in the morning. We decide if we're going to have joy that day. We don't just put on a smile and pretend. We have to figure out what the process is to get joy. And if once we do that, then we can see, okay, am I actually improving in those situations? How easily do I find that joy? Things like that. So there's ways that we can rate ourselves. We kind of have to break it down a little bit. So how do you determine whether or not you're doing well at evangelism? Can you judge that by how many baptisms you have? Not really, because you may talk to 100 people, do everything right, and every one of them reject it. You may talk to one person, do everything wrong, and that person's baptized because he looks in the Bible in spite of what you're saying. He looks at it and goes, "Oh, I've never noticed that before. I need to be baptized." It happens. It depends on the person that you're talking to, right? More than anything. So how do you determine whether or not you're a better evangelist now than you were, better at evangelizing now than you were, let's say, 5 years ago? Okay. Yeah, and you're talking about keeping track of what we do and what is successful. That's the problem, is how do you determine what is successful in evangelism? You can't determine it by how many people are baptized. What is it that determines that? Yeah. Yes, I see what you're saying. So we're looking at our approaches, our methods. Look at is it First Thessalonians or Second Thessalonians? First Thessalonians chapter 2. Here Paul is talking about his conduct, what is success, what he sees as successful work. In verse 2, he says, "For you yourselves know, brethren, that our coming to you was not in vain." Now, not in vain to me says that means it was successful. It was worth something. It was worthwhile. But even after we had suffered before and were spitefully treated at Philippi, as you know, we were bold in our God to speak to you the gospel of God in much conflict. Our exhortation did not come from error or uncleanness, nor was it in deceit. But as we've been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God who tests our hearts. All right, he says we didn't use flattering words or a cloak of covetousness. We didn't seek glory from men in verse 6, either from you or from others, when we might have made demands as apostles, but we were gentle, just as a nursing mother cherishes her own children, affectionately longing for you. We were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our lives, because you had become dear to us. So look at what he says. He says, laboring night and day in the next verse, not to be a burden to anyone. So part of what he's saying is he saw his work successful not because of their reaction, but because how he handled himself and what he taught them, the things that he said, and his demeanor and his attitude. And really, those are the only things that we can control, right? Can't control anything else, but we can control what we say, how we say it, when we say it, that kind of thing. And so that I would suggest that if you're going to rate yourself, maybe you ought to think about that. Rate yourself 5 years ago versus now with how well you teach someone else the gospel. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So he was blameless in the way he behaved. Yeah, that's the evidence. That means he was successful. It didn't matter to him how they responded. I mean, it did, but that's not how he judged whether or not he was successful in his work. So if a missionary comes in and he gives a report, and the only thing he says is, "This is how we did it. This is where we went. This is how we approached it. This is our behavior. We did it in gentleness and all these kinds of things," and never says anything about anyone being converted, would we normally would that be accepted as a good missionary report? What is it? Usually, a good missionary report is what? What are we looking at? How many baptisms we had, and that's almost exclusively what we ask for. I think it's backwards. Anyway, all right. So we're going to stop there, and we'll start there. Pick up there again next week.